Yeah. Thank you. Hello. Oh, crap. Can y'all hear me? Can I hear me? Can y'all hear me? Sorry. I always forget to put the thing on the thing. I do apologize. Doing this day after day and still don't know to play. Good, you can hear me? I don't know if this is even doing anything for me. It is what it ain't what it ain't. Hey. Y'all ready? Hey, welcome to the Rational Radicals, African World Order. I don't know where Skipp at. Let me see. I talked to him earlier this week, but I didn't ask him about today. So just send out some vibrational frequencies and see if Skipp come through. As you know, if he don't come through, we gonna bootleg his music. Anyway, welcome. Where's James? Where's Skipp? They just gonna leave me standing here on my own. What I can do. Anyway, that's fine because this is a sensitive topic, and maybe they scared to talk about it. How do I do the music? Oh, here it is. Hold on. Now, wait, that's not right. Okay, sorry about that. Just had to get the music down. Oh, I see him. Thank you, B. Brittany. Oh, you know, I was rushing. I got home a little late, and I had to run up here, and I was rushing. So I made the mistake of asking my wife to make me a tea. And there's so many struggles. She made, instead of making me my green tea, my bitter green tea, she made me some hibiscus, fruity, flowery, non-alpha, non-masculine tea. So if the energy's off a little bit tonight, blame her, because I'm here sipping on some pinkish reddish colored tea instead of just my black bitter tea. So it's my fault asking a female, one of these females, to do something. But anyway, what to do? But maybe this we'll have a more humane in tone. Oh, and before we get down, speaking of my wife, I want to share this with y'all. Came up with my knot, said, look what I got. I said, that's money that I made in the metal shop. This is my birthday gift. Now, she got it. She ordered it to get here well before my birthday, but this is the South Side of Chicago. And this is the season of giving, the season of desperation in a poor community. So the package was delivered and then it was stolen. I suspect. I don't know nothing, man. You know, I'm street code, street ethics. No such thing as that, but let's pretend. So I ain't snitch, but I did call them folks and said I didn't get my package. And so the package came to first of all, they took a picture of the package and it was at a block away. They didn't deliver it to our door. That was some funny business. Long story short, package came a month ago, was ordered a month ago, well before my birthday. It came here and was dropped somewhere at somebody else's house on a block, more than a block away from my house. And they's like, your package delivered. We didn't get it. So we had to go through all the rigmarole. To get it back. So it's better late than never. I'm still mad appreciative. So this is what I'm going to be doing with my weekend. Because y'all see I got a little architecture. And some of y'all, I've been wanting this one actually. And the White House don't look like this no more. I'm going to have to tear down. Which wing did Trump tear down? I think it was this side or this side. One of these sides I'm going to have to smash. I'm going to build the whole thing and then smash it one sided with a hammer. And because you know the company that Trump hired, he's about to fight the east to the east. So okay, now I know which, the east wing. Okay, McCullough's MAGA. Following Trump's. So I'm gonna have to tear it down and build a golden ballroom. So that's gonna be fun. I really look forward to that. I like Lego architecture. It's one of my favorite hobbies is Lego architecture. So thank you to the wife. I almost forgive you for making me some flowery hibiscus tea. You know, I can't get jiggy with this. See, I feel soft already. I feel the rage, the black rage and blood pressure subsiding. This ain't for me. I'm a black man. Anyway, let's jump in with both feet. Um, this week, I don't know if y'all been following this story, but in Stockton, California, there's an ongoing gang rivalry. The names don't matter. You know, the Mud Boys and all that. There's a drill rap scene or gangster rap scene, gang culture. Long story short, there was a mass shooting, tragic. 3 children and 1 adult killed. These gangs pull up on there's a woman who has, I think the number was 3 children by 3 different men who are all in the same gang. And one of those children was having a birthday party. And it is suspected that someone from within the birthday party had spotted another targeted individual, other individuals right up on the party and opened fire. They missed their target, who has been detained or is in police custody, their target, which was a Filipino gang member. But they hit 3 children and 1 adult who have passed, several other people traumatized and injured for life. And that's been a really, really viral story, headline news. Of course, it's going to fade into the background within a week because mass shootings is not newsworthy anymore. Not since Columbine has a mass shooting been able to sustain in the headlines or in the consciousness of the public, because there's more than one mass shooting a day within the U.S. And me, as an advocate for gun control, yes, the good to take your guns. I want the government to come take your guns. But that's something else. You know, I get called a liberal and a Democrat, so I might as well hold some liberal Democratic position. But anyway, that's not really what I want to talk about. I mean, the stories everywhere. There's been some pretty good reporting, the usual condemnations, thoughts and prayers, the usually empty platitudes, and then the ongoing online back and forth of accusations and revenge, calls for revenge. But what I want to talk about is that public figures, elected officials, the vice mayor and mayor of Stockton had made statements. And some of the people, the public officials, one of them came forward in a press briefing talking about, you know, how the sheriff's department and the FBI and the local police have coordinated and they're zeroing in on suspects and they're going to bring these people to justice and seek justice for these slaughtered children. One of them said in the press briefing that killing children isn't gangster. And then I go online as I'm reading about the story. Several people were asserting that children are off limits, women are off limits, and suggesting that there was some level of code, morals, ethics to, you're not MAGA. How you know which wing of the house? How you following Trump's redecoration of the White House if you ain't MAGA? How you know that? How anybody, the East Wing, how did you know it was the East Wing? Okay, you're an anarchist, I guess. So you just follow destruction anywhere it goes. No, it doesn't matter who's doing the destruction. I appreciate that. Shout out to all anarchists. Bless your hearts. But anyway, they're saying it's not gangster. And throughout my life, I've always heard this rhetoric about the code of the street, from snitching to you don't involve women and children to, you know, this thing, because me being a lifelong neutron, there's this code that neutral people, or they would call us neutrons when I was young. They now call people unaffiliated people civilians. They got rhetoric about not jumping off the porch. And so it always blows my mind that this, what could be argued, positive rhetoric about gangs, gangsterism, and gang culture has so been infused into the psyche of most people in our community, Black people specific, that even our most militant, conscious political leaders have fallen into this demonstrably false narrative about gangs, gangsterism, gang culture. Oh, this is my tape measure. I was looking all over for this, and it's right here. I don't know why. Oh, I know. I was measuring something at my desk, but I need to take that to my little work site tomorrow. That this fake narrative about gangs operating according to codes, morals, ethics, that there are certain behaviors that are certain ways that an individual who lives in a community that is afflicted by gangs and gangsterism, there are certain behaviors you can conduct, adhere to, certain actions you can adhere to that will protect you from the ravages or from being targeted by gangs within your community or individuals who identify as gangsters. And going back to Dr. Bobby E. Wright, I mean, there's about, half a dozen ancestors I find myself quoting every show. I don't know why. If y'all can have prophets and holy men and saviors, I can have some ancestors that I quote constantly. But we've been in this country and we understand it the least. And having lived my entire life, I say probably except for when I was an undergrad in college, having lived the majority of my life in communities, predominantly Black communities, where there was either a direct or even predominant presence of gangs, or an indirect, where there's always a cloud or an aura of threat from gangs and gangsterism. And all my life hearing this bullshit rhetoric about gangs, fallacies about gangs. So yes, B More, there's always been a myth about gangs don't harm women and children. Gangs don't harm women and children. One of my favorite myths is that gangs started as positive organizations that were there to protect Black communities, or that gangs provide alternatives for Black youth who don't have family. They provide family and security where the Black family is not able to provide that. So they provide what's lacking. Kids find in the streets what they lack at home. And I'm just like, how are we been dealing with this gang menace since the 50s? The gang menace as we understand it today. There's always been Black criminals going all the way back to the plantation. Since Black people's forced entry into this country, there have been Black men specifically, but women as well, who have oriented themselves to prey upon other Black people for their own individual or small group gain, who betray the larger community for short-term material gain or individual or sectarian benefit. That has gone all the way back to the plantation. But the gangs, as we understand, gang, do you gang bang? The gangs as the modern version of the gang, the hierarchy, the structure, the symbols, the hand signals, the colors, and all that, as we understand gangs in the modern era, only go back to the 50s. But y'all know, y'all go watch, the Harlem Hustlers, Number Runners, and all of them. But and gangsterism and gangs, which is white as fuck, Goes all the way back to the Roman and Greek Empire. The Spartans, that white people love so much, the warrior cult of the Spartans, literally formulated and sustained youth gangs that would go around preying on the weak and thriving on the weak before they were integrated into formal Spartan society. But I digress. So all I want to do now is kind of talk about why gangs and street cultures have come to be synonymous with Black people, why Black people have tolerated gangs and gangsterism and allowed for this mythology around gangs and gangsterism to formulate, and why gangs and gangsterisms are enemies of Black power. Gangs and gangsterisms are subversive to Black power, and Black gangs are not truly Black institutions. Black gangs are tools of the system. Black gangs are assets, and gangsters are assets of the oppressor, and they are symptoms of oppression. And maybe we can discuss some remedies to the problem of gangs. So first I want to talk about, because even myself being a victim of white hegemony and capitalism, growing up poor, that anybody who breaks the laws, most of my greatest heroes, some of my greatest personal heroes and role models had no respect for American law, from federal constitution down to your state and local jurisdictions. My greatest heroes had no respect for the law. They were all unlawful. They were all lawbreakers. Most of my heroes were at one time could be identified as criminals or would be defined as criminals. Harriet Tubman was a criminal with a bounty on her head. Nat Turner was a criminal. Malcolm X was one of the most probably famous inmates, and his transformation and evolution. But Malcolm X never strayed away or was never ashamed of his criminal past. Detroit Red, Satan, from Malcolm X, from El Hajj, Malik Shabazz. His evolution is inspiration. We just lost H. Rap Brown, George Jackson. Assata Shakur was a fugitive from justice. Pete O'Neill, a fugitive from justice. So it made the Black Liberation Army an unlawful organization, a law-breaking organization. The list goes on. The list goes on and on and on. So it's no surprise that someone could look at your neighborhood gangster, your neighborhood hustler, your neighborhood pimp, who operated outside of the law, who didn't take no shit from the man, didn't bow to the man, and lived according to his own rules and his own set of codes and FTP, Puck the Police. Right? So it's reasonable that Black people, whom throughout our entire time existing under the Ma'afa, existing under slavery, colonialism, Jim Crow, and now in the post-Jim Crow, neo-fascist era, theocratic fascist era of MAGA, out here resisting ICE, there's no surprise that a large population of Black people, an unsettling number of Black people, have some level of respect, affinity for gangs and gang culture, street culture. I was there myself. That was fed by many of our respectable and not so respectable leaders, demagogues, and cult leaders who told us for decades that the street gangs, even I have nothing but admiration and respect for the late, great Khalid Abdul Muhammad. And he was very fond of saying, I hang with my brothers with the bow ties, and I hang with my brothers with the AKs. You know, and he was very proud of his ability to navigate between Black consciousness, Black scholarship, Black radicalism, and still seem and somehow sew that together with the street culture, to the point where at the height of his popularity, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad had locked arms with Ice Cube. And when Ice Cube was leaving NWA and trying to do more politically conscious America's Most Wanted Death Certificate, many people would argue some of his most impactful work, he did it while he was being mentored by Khalid Muhammad. And you go back and listen to those albums, you will hear that interspliced and intermixed in many of his songs was the voice of Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And many songs from Cave Bitch to America's Most Wanted were inspired by the speeches and philosophies of Khalid Muhammad. So even Khalid Muhammad believed that if you could take the gangs with their hierarchies, their structures, their willingness to reject and break the law, their weaponry, and their justified rage, their justified anger, and infuse that with political consciousness, then the gangs can be converted from formations that prey upon the Black community and be turned into formations that fight on behalf of the Black community. You can take them from organizations that run from the police to organizations that confront the police and end the formal state armed repression of poor African people across this country. Now, of course, if you stayed with Khalid Muhammad and his relationship with the streets, with the gangsters, you'll find it didn't work out then. If you read George Jackson, another criminal hero, a criminal ancestor who was not a gangster, who did not promote gangsterism, but he also had the idea. And if you look at the political revolutionary organization that he founded, the Black Guerrilla Family. Tragedy. So anyway, there's the long history. Minister Farrakhan, to this day, was promoting the idea that the Black gangs, street criminals, street hustlers, street thugs were our frontline soldiers. And that when there is any real confrontation between Black people and the government, between Black people and the forces that oppress us, whether it is corporate entities, landlords, banks and bankers coming to foreclose and evict us, if there's any confrontation between the Black community and the forces of oppression, the forces of white institutional hegemonic power, then instinctually, the gangs will go from preying on our community to locking arms with the Black masses to fight our enemies. He has promoted that. He has literally verbatim called them our frontline soldiers. A lot of prominent Black people have stopped calling them street gangs and started calling them street organization, street code, street ethics. Now, all of this has never been supported. Going back to the founding of street gangs, whether you want to go all the way back to the origins of street gangs, whether you want to go back to the Spartan youth of Sparta, to the knights of medieval Europe, go back to La Costa Nostra, up to the street gangs of the US, the Irish gangs, the Jewish gangs. There has never been a time in history that I've been able to identify where the gangs, the street gangs, have sided with the masses against institutional power by their very nature and formation. By their very formation, by the ideas, the mentality that drive, by the motivations that drives the formation and sustaining of gangs, it could never be a sensible decision of a gangster to side with the people. It can never be a sensible decision for a gangster to side with the people against the institutions of power. It wouldn't make sense. In fact, to do so is the most anti-gangster behavior. So it is sensible for a gangster, or it is possible or plausible for a gangster to stop being a gangster and then cultivate themselves into a revolutionary. In fact, there's a couple of movies, The Harder They Come and The Battle of Algiers, that shows the evolution of a street thug, of a gangster, to become a revolutionary. Malcolm X is evidence of a street thug, but Malcolm X could not translate. Malcolm X was not able to translate his street thuggery into revolution. He literally had to purge the street mentality, the thug mentality, the hustler mentality, the pimp mentality. He had to purge that to become Malcolm X. He had to purge Detroit Red in order to become Malcolm X. He wasn't able to transform Detroit Red into Malcolm X because the fundamental capacity and the fundamental components of a gangster are not compatible with revolution and liberation. Gangs are not power. Gangs do not reflect Black power. Gangs at best are a distortion of Black power. Gangs are an extension of white power. They are not. I don't care if it's a Black gang. I don't care if it's a Black gang. A Black gang is a byproduct and an extension and a tool of white power. They always have been, and they cannot be otherwise. And all the rhetoric, calling them street tribes, calling them street organizations. Now, again, I'll be the first to accept that the presence of gangs, the formation of gangs, is a symptom. There's not the problem. Gangs have not caused any problems in our community. Gangs are not the source of the problems in our community. If every Black person that is a member of a gang denounced being a member of the gang, ended their conducting their behaviors that'll sustain them as gangs, because we were oppressed before any Black person ever joined a gang, got attacked, got a brand, took up an AK or a Glock, before a Black person ever did a drive-by. We were oppressed. So gangs are not a source of oppression. They are a symptom and a byproduct of oppression. And a lot of times that gets confused because you got one side of people saying gangs are our frontline soldiers. You got other people that are saying the gangs are the problem. If we could just get rid of all the gangs, if these young people pull their pants up and stop gangbanging, everything would be solved. The elimination of the gangs does not end oppression. So I don't want to get confused. You have to say one or the other because people are just going to infer that. Yeah, these gangs are what's holding us back. Gangs are not the source of poverty. Gangs are not the source of disorganization. But gangs can be utilized to sustain you in oppression, but only if there's an external influence. I mean, as many rappers would say, we don't grow the cocaine here. We don't own no boats. We don't manufacture the guns or the ammunition. So all the tools that we associate with gangs are somehow, and again, even here in Chicago, it is easier for a child to get a new Glock than to get an up-to-date quality textbook in this goddamn city. And that's by design. And I'll tell you, all institutional problems, all systemic problems can only come from people who have institutional power and systemic power. If you don't have institutional power, you dealing with you will not solve this. So if all the kids pull the quarter zip bullshit, if we all pulled our pants up, and it's so crazy. You go back and look at an old lynching photo. those lynchings and mutilation photos of African people, they were all wearing tweed and caps and ties. And if they weren't wearing tweed and ties and sport coats, suit coats, they were wearing overalls doing industrial work. So anyway, just to move on, I'm not condemning Black people for our idealization of gangs and gangsterism and street culture. I'm not condemning us for it. I understand it. It is very obvious because our heroes are unlawful. So our traitors, our internal enemies who are unlawful can sometimes get confused. But the difference between a revolutionary and a gangster, if I had to sum it up in one or two sentences, a gangster is a criminal with a materialist goal, with an individual materialist goal. A revolutionary is a criminal with a collective ideological goal. Gangs and gangsters are trying to come up. Revolutionaries are trying to bring us all up and bring the system down simultaneously. Revolutionaries want to bring the system down and bring the people up. Gangs want to elevate themselves within the system. That's why so many gangsters, 50 Cent, Snoop, that's why so many gangbangers, you'll notice when a gangbanger gets a grip, you'll have antisocial people who, when they are poor in the Black community engaged in gangsterism, they are unlawful, unreasonable, predatory. And as soon as they get a hit record, or as soon as they invest, get some property, get some real money, they move out to the suburbs and they're able to be perfect. You know, you're doing drive-bys and murdering people in your Black community, but then you go to the white community and you baking cupcakes with Martha Stewart. Same person. You getting rich or die trying, selling drugs to your own people, assaulting and promoting murder to your people. I get high, getting high and drug abuse and antisocial behavior amongst your own people. You put on a suit that's too damn tight. This man got so much money, I don't know why he can't hire a proper tailor. His tailor must hate him. But you can go into corporate boardrooms, negotiate property deals, negotiate studio contracts, 50. And there's no, if those white folks burn you, violate you, you know how to engage in civil law and civil conduct. You got no peace, no understanding, no patience for your own. But as soon as you're on the lap and in the territory of the white folks, you become the most law-abiding citizen. Yeah, somebody talking about NBA Youngblood. Remember when he moved to Utah and converted to Mormonism? Y'all forgot he had converted to Mormonism for a little while. He became a good boy. These gangsters who are bloodthirsty when it comes to their own, as soon as they get caught up by the white daddy, all of a sudden, they've perfectly behaved. Right. I'd love to have you come on. But, you know, if you want to be in the comments, I appreciate you, James. Ace homie. Anyway, let's move on. Like I said, I understand. Max's B got out of prison and was brought home as a hero. Rick Ross, Freeway Rick Ross, is in my hometown right now on a major tour. And I grew up in Kansas City with two parents. Both of my parents were addicted to crack cocaine. I'm speaking past tense. Both of my parents to this day. And I know I'm sitting here looking old as shit, but my parents both were both minors when I was born. So my parents were relatively young. Neither one of my parents are 20 years older than me. You know, so Kansas City was ravaged by crack cocaine. there were several years, if you go back and look at the FBI crime statistics to the extent that you can trust them, Kansas City had the highest per capita murder rate year after year. They used to call it Killer City, state of misery. There, to this day, it is unbelievable. Like, you go to places like New York or even here in Chicago, where there is like kind of a fusion of poverty and wealth. Like, you go over to here on the south side of Chicago, you got my community, which is a poor and working class black community, and South Shore, which is a little bit more affluent black community. And then you got Hyde Park and the University of Chicago, and you see that affluence kind of bleeds into poverty, and poverty bleeds into influence. Like in New York, you walk down Eastern Parkway, and while you walk down in Eastern Parkway, on one block, you have Section 8 property next to millionaire condos and penthouses all on the same block. But Kansas City, it's a sharp line. It's a sharp line. Like, literally, you're looking at shanties, and then you cross Troost or you cross Paseo. Really, Troost. The line moves sometimes, depending, but there's gentrification happening now, so the line's actually moving towards Prospect. You are literally looking at shanties, acres and blocks of shanties, and you go here, mansions, State Line Road, wealth, just an enormous amount of wealth, and then right here, nothing but poverty. And even though when I was growing up, the affluent neighborhood was consuming more cocaine and drugs than the poor neighborhood, but all the resources were here because this is where the violence was. And white people were buying their drugs wholesale and were able to just go buy a whole shipment and go and do their drugs in peace in their mansions. And the black people, the poor black criminals, they were buying dosages. So if you're buying your drugs by the dose, that means you got to be in the street grinding nonstop. But I ain't even gonna get into the nature of drug consumption. It's just crazy to me that white people were able to convince us that a bunch of crackheads in the ghetto stealing car stereos and they grandma's VCR were able to fund a global $1 trillion drug trade. The fact that they were able to make the crackhead a musty black dude running up and down the alleyways in the ghetto. If every black drug addict stole every car stereo and VCR in the entire country, they wouldn't generate enough revenue to fund the global drug trade. It is CEOs, banking, industrialists, investment bankers, upper middle class, stay-at-home, affluent white women who were fueling the drug trade. They just weren't being arrested for it. They weren't being detained for it. They weren't being investigated. I'll say again, I was in public school. I thought black folks, poor black folks, we was all about drugs and 40s and blunts, smoking blunts and drinking 40s. I thought black folks really knew how to get high. And then I had a wealthy aunt who said, I want to help give you a hand up, because I was an orphan. Me and my sister and my baby brother, we were orphans at the time. We were wards of the state. So my family got together and my grandma said, I'm going to take the kids in and adopt them, so we don't want the government to get their hands on these stupid kids. And then my aunt said, well, if you adopt them, she said, my grandmother's baby sister, great aunt, was like, you adopt them, I'll pay their tuition to school. So I was able to go to Catholic school, and I think me and my sister were the only people living in public housing and attending Catholic school. Our particular Catholic school. And so anyway, those white Catholic kids, I remember my first Catholic high school house party. And it was like the fucking movies, like those teen, what they call fucking The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, whatever that weird shit from the 80s and 90s. I went there, and it was a huge house, multiple stories, huge wraparound front yard. No adults in sight. And I walk in this party, drugs I'd never seen before, liquor I never smelt before. And those white kids were out in the yard. They were all through the house in the back, spilling over into the neighbor's house. Out in the park, there was this beautiful, elegant park. If you're from Kansas City, get on here and tell these people about Loose Park. They were in Loose Park getting high. One drunk, affluent white boy put a high, affluent white girl on his shoulders, and he was running with her on his shoulders, and he tripped and fell. That girl fractured her neck bone, and the ambulance came, grabbed the girl up, and took her to the hospital, and the white boy kept partying. And the whole time, I'm like, when are the goddamn police going to show up? Because I don't know if Rick the Crip, my best friend since the 3rd grade, we would go to a little black house party, and it'd be 20 kids in there with the music halfway turned down because they didn't have the expensive stereo system. You know you couldn't blow out your mother's Rent-A-Center speakers. She beat your ass because you know they was coming for them Rent-A-Center speakers. And you know, it'd be one joint and one bottle of Matt MD 2020 between 20 kids, and we all in there trying to have a little party in the hood, and a fucking SWAT team would come kick through the door. And if I'm lying, holla at Rip. Rip ain't here today. Rip, when the cops came, Rip jumped out the back window. Cops came and seasoned people and literally sorting us like dominoes, deciding who they want to take to jail and who they're going to send back to the projects. And I'm like, man, the injustice of it all. I got radical. I'm glad I didn't have to go to prison to get radicalized. I got radicalized by just the injustices and inequality of a Catholic school. But I digress. White folks are the real boofers. Anyway. Take this as whenever you think about gangs. And if you want to understand black gangs, or any gangs really, because the same thing applies. We love talking about black gangs formed in order to protect the black community from white gangs. Why do you think the white gangs formed? Go read the history of La Cosa Nostra, La Mafia. Go look at Sicily. Why were white gangs formed? In the post-feudal Europe, white gangs were formed to protect their communities from roving bandits. It's the same story. Ain't nothing to dance in the street about. You got an attack dog, and somebody breaks in my house, and I had, rest in peace, Congo. I had a wonderful little pit bull. I had him for 14 years. And if somebody broke in my house, I'd like to believe that my pit bull Congo would handle business. But what good is it if Congo handles business and the robber runs off, and then Congo turned to me with foaming at the mouth and start attacking me and my family? And I'm going to sit here and be like, well, he sure protected us from the robber, so I guess I gotta tolerate or have some understanding now that he's attacking me. That's a faulty talk. I'd rather just let the robber take the shit and go than be attacked from within my own house by somebody I'm supposed to trust. But I digress. That's the same story for all the groups. But one thing you will notice about the formation of white gangs or modern gangs is they always follow some type of societal upheaval. So the earliest gangs that are in what we call industrial Europe formed after the end of the feudal society, because in the feudal society, the lords who would enforce the law of the land, the lords no longer took responsibility for the peasants and the serfs. So it was one time when the lords had ownership of the serf and the peasants. If you come in and you raid a village and you harm a serf, then you're messing with the Lord's property. And the Lord, if you go in and you go into the villages and you harming my peasants, then they won't be able to work the land and give me my taxes. And then I got taxes and I got to pay the king. I got to pay everybody paying up to somebody. So the lords had an obligation to tend to and protect the peasants under their rulership. But when feudal society collapsed, and it went from royal blood to accumulated and inherited capital as the source of power, as it was transitioning from feudalism, mercantilism to capitalism, in that transition is where the gangs started to form in Italy and throughout Western Europe and most of the Western world. When agricultural society turned into industrial society, and then with black people, gangs were relatively non-existent. And then when it went from agrarian society to an industrial society, and then black folks got into the game hustle when it went from industrial workers, when you could say, hey, I'm sick of this Jim Crow shit. Let me pack up my shit and head up north and work in the mills. Let me go get a job in the factories. Let me go get a job in production. And then in the post-industrial America, that's where the black gangs emerged. So gangs or opportunistic formations that arise out of social upheaval, not necessarily poverty. You can still have there are gangs rising out of affluent middle class. You or go and read a lot of gang interviews. And I know the stereotype is, oh, I didn't have nobody, I didn't have no mother, I didn't have no father. There's a significant number of the earliest gang members came from stable two-parent households. But there was that upheaval. And the parents were trying to impose the old way of thinking and the old way, oh, what you do now, you go down and you go talk to Roscoe, he gonna put you on, you start in at the entry level, you get your union card. When you get your union card, you rise up in the ranks, and pretty soon you'll be able to buy a house and have you a woman by your side. And then they were like, and the young people are like, that's not how society works anymore. I got to get an education, or I got to hit these streets. So when there is that rift where the old people are not adapting or comprehending the struggles of the young people, and the young people can't rely on that old wisdom and the old way of doing shit, and they have to figure out shit their own way. And then you used to have, well, I'm going to become a radical. I'm going to become a communist. I'm going to become a socialist. I'm going to join up with the Panthers. I'm going to become an Afrocentric. I'm going to become a black nationalist. COINTELPRO destroyed that. So it's either I got a wicked jump shot, I'm going to go to school, or I'm going to take it to the streets. So they destroyed options. But we mistakenly believe taking it to the street or going corporate, going to college and working for the Pentagon, working for the multinational corporation, working for the government, enlisting in the military was a positive pro-social alternative to the streets. But I digress. What was I saying? Rick Ross. I got to stop talking about. Rick Ross is in my hometown. One of the cities that were literally hollowed out by crack cocaine. And it was crazy because in my family, I had, not necessarily have, but members of my family that worked in law enforcement and members of my family that were strung out on drugs. And for a time I worked in a trauma center there, and they would haul in people I grew up with on stretchers. Anyway, it's insane that one of the chief architects, I won't call him an architect, instruments. One of the chief instruments of the crack cocaine pandemic is able to come to Kansas City, and brothers and sisters in Kansas City are celebrating his arrival. That is a cognitive dissonance. Even if you want to try to say, well, Rick Ross was a victim himself. No, that's not true. Rick Ross was not a victim. Rick Ross was a vector. When the ravages, when the exploitation, when the penetration of white domination, of oppression, affliction, we are all victims. Every African on this planet is a victim of capitalism, white hegemony, racism. But those who respond to their victimization by preying on others, you are no longer a victim, you are a vector. So instead of resisting and healing from the abuse, from the oppression, you embrace the oppression and begin to perpetuate and impose the oppression on other vulnerable people. You go from being a victim or a vector. In the medical sense, a vector is a creature that is afflicted with the illness and spreads the illness to other creatures. So a raccoon with rabies is a rabies vector. A mosquito is a malaria vector. People who refuse to wear their mask and wash their hands and keep their distance under the COVID pandemic, which is still active. We're still being ravaged by COVID, but that's a whole nother discussion. Half of, like 2 or 3 of my COVID shows have been snatched down off the internet. I mean, all these conspiracy theories out here and all these conspiracists, ain't nobody talking about this pandemic. I mean, the West solution to COVID is like here and here and here. Just let's ignore it and it'll go away. But I digress. So I ain't even going to share it. But people I came up with, people I used to work with, I ain't going to say y'all names because I'm planning to go back to Kansas City. I go to Kansas City next year and I'm going to be looking at some of these people and I'll ask them face to face, why the fuck was y'all parading Rick Ross around Kansas City? Let me get off it because I don't want to say names. Max B, that dude from Big Meech from Black Mafia family. People coming home from murdering other black people, selling drugs to other black people, being literal race traders, and we celebrate them like they fucking Robin Hood. We're treating race traders like folk heroes. We're treating race traders as though they were folk heroes. And I understand it. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I think we need to correct it. The thing is that black men have accepted the lie that the place where we get to rule, the place where we get to govern, the place where we ain't got to worry about the white man watching us and keeping his hand on us and dictating to us is the streets. He might have the boardroom. He might have the government chambers. He might have academia, but the streets belong to the black man. We run the streets. We own these streets. And so a lot of even brothers who ain't even affiliated, dudes that are like me, video games, comic books, and G.I. Joe toys their entire childhood. Ain't never spun a block, ain't never held no weight, ain't never pointed a gun at another person. And I grow up and I interact with them dudes now. We can't, because the vast majority of East Hills Village, I'm trying to avoid saying names, East Hills Village, South Kansas City, East Side Kansas City, a lot of cats are like, because they came up in that neighborhood, they want to carry that bravado. In fact, that's what mafia literally means, swagger. Pumping your chest out, trying to puff yourself up to look bigger than you really are. And they use the language. I see black people out here with doctorates talking about no snitch. Like using street and gang lingo. I do it too, I guess, mockingly, but it's wild. Shit is wild. Let me move on. I got to get to what I'm saying. We always say gangs are capitalist bottom feeders. Gangs and gangsters are capitalist bottom feeders. From the establishment of the earliest Western hierarchies, from the origins of Western civilizations. And I know some of y'all gonna want to go to feudal Japan or the Chinese dynasties, or even African antiquity and India, the Thuggies. I know y'all gonna want to go outside of the Western context and say, well, they do, but we don't live under that. We don't live under Eastern domination. So I'm discussing this because of the dominant cultural, ideological, and economic perspective. We live under a white capitalist worldview. We are governed by white capitalist social theories, and every other power, regional power, every other neo-colonial subject is functioning in response to that, effectively or ineffectively, whether resisting, submitting, or is trying to escape it. So since the founding of Western civilization and hierarchies, you always had formations of people who have the same value system and goals as the elite, but didn't have the authority, legitimacy, and resources of the elite. So the elite, the very by definition, are parasites who prey on the masses. But the elites, when they prey on the masses, it's legal, it's contractual, it's formal, it's lawful, it's even moral and appropriate when the elites prey on us. I earned this $1 billion. I inherited this company. I inherited this land. Here's my deed. So you have poor people, the oppressed people, who have the same outlook, same values, same desire. We want the money. We want the power. We want the jets. We want the women in bikinis. But I didn't inherit money. I didn't inherit land. I don't have formal education or status. I don't have certificate. I didn't take oaths. So how do I get this, what they got? Utilizing the same methods of exploitation, abuse, predatory exploitation, and extirpation. Putting in as little work as possible and extracting them as much as I can. Abusing people and extracting the fruits of other people's labor for my own enrichment while doing as little labor as possible. Gangsters are bottom-feeding capitalists. They have the same goals, objectives, and values as the elites and the oppressors. They just don't have the legitimacy. They don't have the resources. They don't have the law. They don't have the institutions. They have never been about freedom. And the reason why gangs cannot be turned into revolutionary organizations is they operate off of wealth, money. And the working class masses, the oppressed people, will never have more money than the oppressor. So even if a gangster is fighting it out with the oppressor and his hired goons, the police, the moment that they go revolution and say, I'm joining the people, all the master got to do is say, here's a grip, here's a badge, here's a title, here's a contract where we're going to set you up to do a show with Martha Stewart. Here's a movie studio in your own name. Set up your own studios and we'll market and mass distribute your music. We'll market and mass distribute your movies. We'll market and mass distribute your clothing line. And at that moment, they turn around and be like, black people, we are our own worst enemy. Little Boosie said black people are the worst people because we attack each other. As if white folks haven't fought 2 world wars. We fight over neighborhoods. They fight over globe. They fighting over resources. They fighting over the atmosphere and fighting over space. They fighting over rights to mine the moons and meteors and killing other white folks to do it because we ain't even on that level. But we the worst. When they didn't drop bombs on each other, when they on the surveillance under each other, when they have the resources and the capacity to stop starving and to stop. You're looking at the United States as funding a war and playing both sides, and Ukraine, the whitest, bluest eyed people you'd ever find. Central Europe. But we killing each other. When they kill each other on a global industrial scale, and he's comparing that to neighborhood beef. And I'm not saying that loss of life is insignificant, but when you want to compare who the real killers are, but I digress. These capitalist bottom feeders, we are very fond of saying there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, which is true. But guess what else? It's not possible under capitalism. There's no African liberation under capitalism. There is no black unification or no black power under capitalism, because by design, capitalism is predatory and exploitative, and liberation is about mutual and collective benefit. Capitalism is about concentration of wealth. Liberation is about the just distribution and redistribution of wealth. So if you have a capitalist organization, even if it's unlawful, even if it seems to be fighting against the system, even if it's going against the rules, even if it refuses to wear a shirt and tie and refuses to speak standard English and refuses to pull its pants up, refuses to disarm, as long as the ideology, the goals, the mentality is capitalist, accumulate at any cost, get rich or die trying, we cannot claim them. They are a faction and an offshoot. And as I said, You cannot find a time in European hierarchy where there weren't these bottom feeders. In the time of the monarchs, if you didn't have royal blood, you form yourself a little band of robbers and you go around and raid the peasants. But you couldn't be too hard on the peasants, because if you pissed off the nobles and you piss off the sovereign monarch, then they might send their soldiers after you. So you do, it's an ebb and flow. Even on the slave plantation, you had the slave drivers, the black traders. The black man said, I don't want to get out there and have to meet my cotton quota every day, getting my hands raw and bloody from picking that coarse cotton, getting my lungs fill up with fluid, have my lungs fill up with bile, working the mills. I don't want to be down in the mines, extracting the wealth from the earth while I'm in chains. So I go to the white man, say, look, I'm big, I'm strong, I'm tough, and I'm willing to beat the shit out of the next African. If I see a black person get out of line, you don't have to sully your hand, boss. You don't have to break a sweat, boss. You can sit up on that porch, or you can sit up on that horse. Let me do your dirty work, boss. Let me take it to the streets. So there was a whole population of black drivers. And the drivers, it wasn't the drivers didn't, because you had the overseers. There was a whole plantation hierarchy from the master to the slave. And there was a little piece of population of black people who didn't have to do labor, because their job was to keep the niggas in place. I trees coons for you, boss. Plantation bucks, the black drivers, who would issue out punishments and make sure, and their main goal, two goals, to extract the maximum amount of labor and to do everything in their power to prevent rebellion and resistance. And tell me what the fuck the gangs ain't doing today. Tell me the roles and the gangs right now in the black community, if it ain't the same as the drivers. These traders been with us. Except back then, I don't think Africans weren't sitting around the fire on Sunday when our Christian masters would give us a day off or give us a reprieve, some of them. They weren't watching reenactments of the traders and praising the traders, trying to dress and be like the traders, like we are today. I haven't read any accounts of enslavement where the slave driver was looked to as a folk hero, as a Robin Hood figure, as somebody who kept it real. The white man ruled the house, but I ruled the shacks. The white man ruled the government and ruled the corporation, but I ruled the streets. It's the same fucking shit. But we got it twisted now, because many of us, even though we're not affiliated, have the same distortion about that we can elevate within this system. But we can do it lawfully. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to be a productive laborer. I'm going to be law-abiding. The government, through its intelligence agency, FBI, the FBI utilized gangs in COINTELPRO to target and suppress black liberation movements. Hey, what's up, Infinito? Absolutely. They are both. They are conditioned and they are traders. Being conditioned does not render you innocent of being a trader. Because all of us, everybody's conditioned. So you can submit to your conditioning or you can resist your conditioning. You look at Operation Gladio. Whenever the CIA is attacking Venezuela, and when they go to Venezuela, the first thing, whenever the Western imperialist, whether it's Mossad, MI6, CIA, the first thing they do when they go into a country to destabilize them, especially if they are fomenting revolution, is they look for organized criminals. They know the number one ally of foreign invaders are the organized criminal element. Operation Gladio, where they said the truth is Western Europe wasn't as stupid as America in the post-World War II era. So in Western Europe, where the battles of World War in Northern Africa and the Middle East, where the battles of World War II took place, everybody knew who was fighting against the communists. The United States, the war was played out for us on television and in newspapers and in drawings and pictures. The average American during World War II, aside from Pearl Harbor, would get up, go to work, come home, and maybe there'd be a shortage. They had to ration some things. We had to do some rationing and all of that. But average, you get up, go home, come back, and you look at the news and you look at the war on TV. In Western Europe, Great Britain, France, you get up, go to work, come home, there's a crater where your house used to be. I had a Bosnian, somebody who was in the Serbian civil wars, said that's exactly what happened to him. He got up and went to work one day. He came home, there was a crater where his house used to be. He found a neighbor who could call his family, and they were like, yeah, the family was already heading over to the next town where his wife had some relatives. And he picked through the rubble to get what he could salvage, put it on a wheelbarrow, and walked over a couple of 100 miles to the next town. Right? So all that to say is Europeans, being as racist as they are, understood who fought the Nazis. They knew it was the anarchists. They knew it was the socialists. They knew it was the communists who fought and defeated the Nazis. They also knew that the monarchs, the industrialists, the tycoons, the business tycoons of Western Europe, from Western Europe to Ford, IBM, DuPont, all the elites in society were working with Hitler and bowing down to the Third Reich, bowing down to Hitler. And some of them were allies and supporting them. And the only people that saved them from the gas chambers, the only people that saved them from being completely overrun by the Blitzkrieg were the communists in every country, whether it's France. And so at the end of World War II, while we were having parades in America pretending like the United States, our boys won the war, that lie that American soldiers, the greatest generation, won the war against the Nazis and preserved democracy, they knew, no, it was the communists and the socialists and the anarchists that won the war, that started the fight and sustained the fight. And so the United States says, if we don't do something, all of Europe is going to look like Soviet Union. There's going to be a communist uprising in every country because the communists are loved, the communists are heroes, and we can't come and talk about free enterprise because they know that the free market and free enterprise did nothing to save and rescue them. So what did they do? They engaged with the mafia. They engaged with the street thugs of Spain. They went throughout Western Europe and armed, educated in strategy and tactics of terrorism and guerrilla warfare, and fought off and stopped the rise of communism in Western Europe. Same thing they did in the Middle East when socialist democracies were coming up in Iran, Iraq, in what's that place? Jordan. They went and said, well, we're going to do a 2-tier attack. We're going to go and try to reinstitute, put the elites back in power, put the monarchs in power from the top, and then we're going to get with the criminal street element from the bottom, and we're going to crush the socialist and the communist in the middle. Same thing they did here with the Black Power movement. We're going to elevate and give some Negroes some good jobs and titles, integrate some Negroes that are obedient, and Negroes that want to be equal to the white man, who want to be brown-skinned Europeans, and we're going to allow the criminal element to run rampant, give them weapons and crack cocaine that we made in our laboratory, and the black militant, the black rebels crushing in between. It's the same goddamn tactic, and we want to act like black gangs are special. Black gangs are somehow not the same as the Irish mafia, as La Cosa Nostra, as the Aryan Brotherhood. We want to act like our gangs. No, they fight for us, or at least they against the system. Nobody is more loyal to this system than black gangsters. There's a difference between breaking the law and opposing the status quo. Gangs break the law in order to elevate and integrate into the status quo. gangs and gangsters have no intention of challenging, subverting, or transforming or upending the status quo of wealthy elites and exploited workers and masses. And gangs do a lot of violence, but there's no justification for descending violence. Let's just run this down. I'm losing time and I ain't have. God damn it. Okay. There's 3 types of violence. There's ascending violence, lateral violence, descending violence. Ascending violence is when a person lower on the hierarchy commits violence on someone higher on the hierarchy. That's like when Luigi shot that CEO. That was called ascending violence. When black people take to the streets and bust the windows out of multinational corporations or even burn down buildings that they don't own from slumlords in their community, that's ascending violence. Lateral violence is me and my brother throwing hands. Somebody who is equal to me on the same level of me as the status quo. So whether it's 2 CEOs engaged in corporate espionage, whether it's 2 able-bodied men throwing blows in the street, or even if it's 2 prisoners trying to shank each other, and so that's called lateral violence, where people commit violence against other people that are equal to them. And the most common and widespread form of violence is descending violence, where people above the status quo, higher in the hierarchy, commit violence against those lower. Now, we don't even recognize descending violence because descending violence is just, it's godly, it's lawful, it's legitimate, it's legal. So gangs engage in Dave Chappelle, descending violence. Yes, punch down. Remember Dave Chappelle said he wanted freedom of speech and he wanted to go on there and attack transgender people when the fascists had made the strategic and a very effective plan to demonize transgender people. And people who've never seen or heard of transgenderism 10 years ago were now saying it's the #1 threat to our children and our way of life. You know, I had found some propaganda posters where they used to say the same thing about lesbians and the same thing about homosexuals and the same thing about interracial couples, bring about the downfall of the West, and it threatens our children. Anyway, Dave Chappelle said, I'm going to continue and you can't cancel me. He didn't lose his way. When did he ever have his way? See, we love making folk heroes out of sellouts, suckers, and chumps. He was never had his way. And I was indifferent to Dave. I actually was a fan of Dave, thought he was funny. But when he started getting political, he never had good politics. He never took an appropriate stand. And he always was attacking. Go back and look at the old episodes of the Chappelle Show. Go look at the show in the Mad Real World. Or go look at his skit on black reparations. He's always had disdain for the black poor people and black working classes. But I digress. We starve for heroes. We have a hero anemia. Black people, we have hero anemia. The COINTELPRO did such a thorough job of destroying our principled leadership that we trying to turn any old sellout Uncle Tom handkerchief head Negro into a hero. But I forgot. Where was I? Y'all throwing me off. Descending violence. Oh, Dave Chappelle, Mr. Free Speech, you can't cancel me, went to Saudi Arabia and took a couple of million. He's already worth 80 million. Why? How can you be selling? How are you selling out when you already got everything you could put out? But he went over there and signed a contract, and they said, boy, you can talk about this. Here's the list of things you can't talk about, Mr. Free Speech. And he said, yes, sir, boss, and signed that contract and went over there and got that grip. So obviously, he wasn't attacking transgender people because he's principled. He was attacking them because they didn't pay him enough. So let me tell you, transgender community or anybody else, if you don't want Dave Chappelle to attack or target you, just come up with a bigger check than the Saudi royal family could come up with. And he'll bow down. And all these black men were like, yeah, Dave Chappelle holding us down. Chumps and suckers. So, anyway, descending violence is unjust, but it's almost ignored. Lateral violence is disruptive because it harms our ability to coalesce into a organized regiment and organization group body ideological cohesion in order to liberate ourselves. Ascending violence is justified, necessary, and should be celebrated. Nat Turner, ascending violence. Mark Essex, ascending violence. So anyway, here's the reality. Under capitalism, any population that reaches economic obsolescence, that loses their economic viability, will be targeted for extermination. And that's not even unique to Black folks. Black people, our economic niche has been pretty much been captured and taken away. We are rapidly approaching economic obsolescence, and the Black gangs not only will be used to facilitate our genocide, they will be used as justification. Remember back in the 90s, they were saying, well, we could lower the crime rate if we aborted Black males. Just or the super predators, the criminal gene. So what we have to do is not to politicize or radicalize the gangs, because the truth is the gangs are already political. Gangs are right-wing, status quo political. So just because they don't use political rhetoric, gangs are extremely political. So our job is not to politicize the gangs. Our job is to radicalize gang members. And the process of radicalization extracts them. And we need to push for, in our community, gang amnesty. If the gangs, whenever they want to rebrand, whenever they want some positive rhetoric, they always say, we're going to have a truce. A gang truce means nothing. So the next time there's an uprising and the Black community unites in an uprising and in a rebellion, and then here come the gangs. They did it with Rodney King. They did it during the King assassination riots. They did it, Laquan McDonald. And every time Black people rise up as a collective, they step up and say, we're going to have a gang truce. Say, no, we need gang amnesty. We need to re-educate and reintegrate these youth into our community and have pro-social political organizations that are anti-capitalist, that are pro-social and socialist. Gangs are capitalist and anti-social. We need not condemn them, but we do need to diagnose, to understand them, and systematically reintegrate. Stop fucking celebrating. Stop spreading the rhetoric about gangs being street tribes, street organizations, or being formed to protect our community. But I'm almost on time. Let's have some questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to everything. Oh, I said enough. Maybe perhaps I had said too much. But if you really need an example about, well, let's say when everything breaks down, what the gangs are going to do, look at Haiti. Haiti is basically run by gangs now. And see, did they rise up to defend the people in Haiti? Or did the Haitian gangs rise up to exploit the people who are already in a desperate situation? I digress. You don't believe any gang had the initial intent of positive impact or the possibility face subversion when attempting to do so. That's the problem, saying a gang had a positive impact. There's a thing where you have a healthy cell, a healthy functioning cell. But when that cell becomes cancerous, and then you're going to be like, well, the cell used to be healthy. So yes, I don't know if we can define them as gangs. It is instinctual for people to defend their community. I had a neighbor who had a situation. I don't see him very often. We kind of operate on opposite, but I had a neighbor who had a situation. And another neighbor who I do talk to more regularly said, yo, this neighbor's having an issue. And within 3 minutes, everybody in the neighborhood descended. Everybody in the neighborhood. I came out. people from across the street, all the brothers and sisters came out and was like, what's going on? I don't want to get into the brothers' business, but somebody in the neighborhood had an issue that wasn't like an intimate in the house issue, but it had an issue outside. And the whole community spilled out into the street. There was no call to arms. We don't have no formal, Q, he watches sometimes. Q's running for political office, so he ain't in the comments like he used to be. I guess he's got other things to do. But, I'm at home. Q give me a call like, yo, there was an incident, boom. Sometimes he'll be like, step up. Other times he'll be like, yo, fall back. But it is natural and instinctual for people to come together when they feel that they are commonly threatened. That's not something you have to form a group for. So the reality is, in Black communities, when we were being targeted, the men would just step out and step up. That was just natural. You don't have to form a fucking gang for that. That's a community. The community fought against racist aggression, not the gang. It's not like, oh, well, the men who were defined as gang members all stood up and the brothers who weren't in the gang stayed home. I've been living in predominantly Black communities my entire goddamn life. And I've seen the community instinctually and almost instantly mobilize and get together. The cops get out of hand and abuse or kill some Black youth and Black kids, and the Black youth and the Black community is in the streets. They fill up the streets almost instantly. So I think it's a myth. Well, the gangs were formed in order to protect. No. I don't buy it. That hasn't been any of our experience. So I think gangs were formed to prey on the Black community by definition. And if you're not preying on the Black community as a formal group, then you're not a gang. I don't know what you're a club, you're a posse, you're a community. So the community had a positive intent. And some of those communities said, wow, we can come together for defense. How about we can use the same number of people to attack each other. So I think it's more branding. I think we need to rethink and reapproach and come up with some new terminology, because that old gang started off community revolution in progress. The Crips stood for community revolution in progress. Blood stand for brotherly love overcomes oppression and domination. But if you go look at the documentary Bastards of the Party, these are different. There's a break. There was a break. There was a severance there somewhere. So you had brothers fighting to defend the community, and then you had brothers preying on the community. I don't know what the point of separation is, but the people over here can't take credit for this, and the people over here shouldn't be blamed for that. Okay, they were revolutionaries at first. Yeah, I've read a lot of that same as well. But I don't think that these groups were just people in the community. And I've been seeing since I was a child, brothers step up and step out, and sisters too step up and step out, and didn't have to formalize. You got to form. A bunch of white boys come in a pickup truck, busting out Black folks' windows in this neighborhood, and we're going to be like, oh, we got to form a group. Every brother and every Black man on this block would be in the streets like that. And then the numbers would double and quadruple when we get on the phone. So it's a myth that we need gangs or needed gangs for that shit. Anyway, who asked that question? I think I posted it. Anyway, I appreciate y'all listening. The Rational Radicals. If you like this, the glare is kind of funny, but we got merch at African World Order where you can purchase the merch and help sustain the African World Order channel. There's a new shows coming to this channel in the new year. We got some sisters who got a show coming up. I guess I don't know what I should say. I don't know if it's my place to say. I know y'all supporting the Cosmic Cowrie Shell. So stay plugged in, stay locked in. And there's going to be a lot more to come in 2026. That's going to be the year. We're going to be the revolutionary source of enlightenment and entertainment. Mark my words, African World Order. And you can say you got in on the ground floor. Say, hey, I was following African World Order when they was broke and struggling next to nothing. So you can come up with us, holler at us. But like I said, new shows coming, a lot of stuff coming. Go to African World Order, buy the merch. make a positive contribution to our just aspirations. And Saturnalia, listen, listen. It really upsets me that we turn a sexual orgy into a consumer orgy. Can we go back to the sexual orgy? You know, there was it used to be a beautiful thing. Christmas ruined Saturnalia. Saturnalia was a sex orgy, food and revelry and sex. And now, shoot, if these Christian traditions went back to their pagan origins, I might be sitting up in the church. Oh Lord, almost time for the orgy. Oh Lord. Y'all want to I'm telling you, Christians, if y'all really want to, because church attendance is going down. Church affiliation is going down, which means the money's going down. Let me tell y'all something, Christian. If y'all revert some of these pagan rituals back to their pagan origins, I'm telling you, at least I'll be there. Let me see if my wife's in the comments. Nope, I can say what I want to say. Yeah, so anyway. Yeah, I say it all the time. Christmas is a corporate consumer orgy that grew out of a pagan sex orgy. I'm for real, shit. I'd be the highest Christian, Lord the God. Shit, if let me tell you something. If anybody want to go back to the pagan origins, I'm down with that. Y'all love to talk about the origins of y'all try to justify worshiping Christianity because you said it had African origins. If you take Christianity back to the origins, you might just have a new recruit tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for listening. I'm sorry that B. Brittany brought us down. She brought down the discourse. Well, I'll try to leave on high note. I don't know. They said African, I'm going to call Shayun tomorrow, but they said that the bird's eye view is supposed to reignite next year. So the bird has flown south for the winter, and it should be back on its perch. So that's all I know. But as soon as I know, I know. I tell all the time. That's what y'all said when I got in trouble with Black Liberation Media, because I keep telling. I'm the Pan-African Grinch and the revolutionary snitch. I tell everything I know, so don't tell me nothing. Anyway, Friday after next, we'll see y'all Tuesday. Tune in to African World Order. Like, share, subscribe, share the show with your friends, enemies, allies, homies, and niggas. Get the word out, get the algorithm flowing on our behalf, and I'll see y'all next time. Put a thing on the thing. Peace.